This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome. You're watching ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila in Cambodia. Hello, Crystal. Go ahead, Crystal.
Sorry for that, Alma.
It's okay.
I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
Good to have you here. And now for the headlines. Scattered to widespread monsoon rains will still be experienced over many areas in Luzon as Typhoon Fabian enhances the southwest monsoon.
The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, raised Alert Level 4 in Myanmar in view of the worsening COVID-19 situation in the country and to ensure the safety and welfare of the remaining Filipinos there.
Russia announced that a batch of its Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine was produced for the first time in Vietnam, which is battling a new wave of COVID infections.
News anchors in junta-ruled Myanmar have been told to stop using the English pronunciation for COVID-19, with speculation swirling the word has been culled to ensure more positive coverage amid a deadly spike of cases.
First, let's go to the weather situation here in the Philippines. Scattered to widespread monsoon rains will still be experienced over many areas in Luzon as Typhoon Fabian enhances the southwest monsoon, that according to Pagasa today. The weather condition will prevail over the Ilocos region, the Cordillera Administrative Region, Metro Manila, most of Calabarzon and Central Luzon, and portions of Mimaropa. Fabian packs maximum sustained winds of 150 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 185 kilometers per hour. It was last tracked 510 kilometers northeast of Itbayat, Batanes, slowly moving west-northwestward. Pag-asa said in its 5 a.m. Tropical Cyclone Bulletin, the Tropical Cyclone Wind Signal number 1 is still hoisted over Batanes and the Babuyan Islands. Strong winds and near-gale conditions may prevail in those areas within 36 hours.
The National Parade in Singapore will now be postponed to a later date. Singapore has just reverted to a Phase 2 or heightened alert of reopening of its economic and social activities due to an increase in COVID-19 cases. We have Heather Clemente joining us live from our EBC Singapore Bureau. Hi, Heather.
Hello, Crystal. Singapore's Ministry of Defense stated that the National Day Parade will be postponed to August 21 due to heightened alert or Phase 2. The event has been postponed 2 days after the co-chair of the government's COVID-19 Working Committee, Lawrence Wong, indicated that the parade would go on as planned despite Singapore's return to Phase 2 from July 22 to August 18. A ceremonial parade will be held instead on August 9 to commemorate Singapore's 56th anniversary of independence. It will be identical to the one held in the Padang last year. However, it will be held at the Marina Bay floating platform. To prepare for the NDP on August 21, rehearsals will be held later in smaller component groups, and the dates will not be publicized in order to keep crowds away from Marina Bay, said the Ministry of Defense. The NDP has been held every year on August 9 since 1966 to commemorate Singapore's independence. The national celebration draws Singaporeans from all walks of life together as one united people to celebrate nationhood and unity. This is the first time that the NDP will be held on another date. This year's NDP is planned to take place at the float and will be a centralized, in-person event. All participants and spectators must be completely vaccinated, among other precautions taken. Following the postponement of the NDP, the Prime Minister's office has announced that the National Day rally would be rescheduled for August 29. Back to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Heather, for the update. Please keep us updated and keep safe there.
Thank you, Crystal. Reporting live from EBC Singapore, I'm Heather Pilar Clemente. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Thailand's leading CEOs and the business community is calling on the government of Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha to get the pandemic under control and to compensate people who have been adversely affected by it. Crystal Mapa joins us live from Bangkok to tell us more. Hello, Crystal.
Hi, Alma. Yes, a video conference with the 40 CEO Plus group and Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha Wednesday was held to urge the government to get the COVID-19 pandemic under control and rejected the idea of Wuhan-style lockdown, according to government spokesperson Anucha Burapachaisri. 40 of Thailand's leading CEOs mentioned that the private sector is ready to support the government with necessities such as rapid test kits, medicines, hospital beds, and intensive care units. They also offered digital technologies and innovations to assist with home isolation programs. Suggestions of the group include expansion of relief packages for businesses which have been ordered to close, short and midterm plans to stimulate the economy by spending while encouraging private sectors to invest, create more jobs, and to prepare the country for the new economy. The idea of public-private committee to encourage new agricultural practices, quality tourism, and digital transformation that could rehabilitate the country was also recommended by the group. The plan to reopen Thailand in mid-October still stands, according to Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha, as Phuket and Samui has been open to fully vaccinated international tourists. However, Alma, the government considers these suggestions to discuss with the Cabinet and with the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration. Meanwhile, Dr. Opart Karnkawinpong, the Director General of the Department of Disease Control, said that a Wuhan-style lockdown, where strictest measures or complete lockdown may be imposed in the next 2 months if COVID-19 situation in Thailand will not improve, as the country recorded new highs of infections almost every day since last week. Thailand recorded 14,575 new cases, another new high today, and 114 new fatalities. Since April 1, there have been 438,844 COVID-19 cases, in which 292,726 have recovered. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Crystal, for your updates. Please keep safe and have a safe weekend ahead.
Likewise, Alma, reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand. I am Crystal Mapa. We live in interesting times.
Back here in the country, the Department of Foreign Affairs raised alert level 4 in Myanmar in view of the worsening COVID situation in the country and to ensure the safety and welfare of the remaining Filipinos there. Under alert level 4, the Department of Foreign Affairs strongly recommends that Filipinos leave Myanmar as soon as possible, as the healthcare system in the country is close to reaching its maximum capacity and may not be able to provide adequate medical attention to Filipinos who become ill in the coming weeks. Filipinos may contact the Philippine Embassy in Myanmar for evacuation flight options. The advisory further states that for their own safety, Filipinos will not be allowed to return to Myanmar while Alert Level 4 remains. While waiting to be evacuated, the department advises Filipinos to exercise extreme caution and to only leave their residences when absolutely necessary, such as for buying food and other supplies. Filipinos are advised to regularly check with the Philippine Embassy in Yangon for further advisories.
A batch of Chinese COVID-19 vaccines arrived in Myanmar on Thursday, an AFP reporter said, as the coup-racked country battles a devastating new surge in cases. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and the latest wave of the pandemic has struck with many hospitals empty of pro-democracy medical staff. The shipment contained 736,000 Sinopharm doses, according to media controlled by the State Administration Council, as the junta dubs itself. The junta has purchased 4 million vaccines from China. It said earlier this month, adding Beijing will donate a further 2 million. But widespread anger at the coup and fear of being seen to cooperate with the regime is keeping many away from military-run hospitals. Instead, volunteer groups across the country are fighting desperate battles to source precious oxygen and bring the dead for burial or their practice of cremation. On Thursday, a shadow government of ousted lawmakers said it had formed its own COVID task force and would seek international support to procure vaccines. The National Unity Government, whose members are in exile or underground, did not make clear how it would be able to secure and administer vaccine doses in Myanmar. Around 1.75 million people have so far been vaccinated in the country of 54 million, according to authorities. Beijing enjoys exceptional leverage over Myanmar and has refused to label the military action a coup. Myanmar on Wednesday reported 6,701 new cases, up from around 100 per day in early June. Earlier this month, state media reported junta leader Min Aung Hlaing had agreed to buy 2 million vaccines from Russia, another major ally, without specifying which shot. Myanmar's creaking healthcare system had struggled to respond to COVID, even before the general's putsch. Swathes of the country were put under partial lockdown last year, although enforcement was often lax in the developing nation, where many face a stark choice between following regulations and feeding their families.
Meanwhile, news anchors in Myanmar have been told to stop using the English pronunciation for COVID-19. Now, speculation are swirling that the word has been culled to ensure more positive coverage amid a deadly spike of cases there. For the previous 18 months, anchors on state-backed news programs had used the English COVID-19 in their reports on the virus that has rampaged across the world and is now devastating Myanmar. Authorities reported more than 6,000 cases on Wednesday, up from around 100 per day in early June, with hospitals across the country suffering from a lack of oxygen and doctors. Amid the spike and with the junta's response being widely panned, the two syllables of the English word 19 may have made for uncomfortable listening, as one anonymous post on social media pointed out. They sound like winning and beating in Burmese, respectively.
In a clinic in a remote Myanmar town, some of the few doctors still working after the coup emptied hospitals are battling to keep their COVID-19 patients alive as the virus resurges. Let's watch this.
Okay. ကျွန်တော်တို့ဆေးရုံမှာဆိုရင်အလုံး80လောက်သုံးပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါလည်းသူတို့တိတ်ပြီးတော့မလုံလောက်ပါဘူးသို့တော့အပြင်ကအိမ်တိုင်းမှာဒုက္ခရောက်နေဆိုသူတို့ကိုမျှပြီးတော့ပေးရတယ်တိုင်းရင်းဆေးရုံကိုဗစ်ဆေးရုံကိုလည်းမျှပေးရတယ်နောက်ပြီးတော့လူမှုအဖွဲ့အစည်းတွေကလည်းသူတို့ကိုလည်းမျှပေးရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီအုံနောက်အစားဆုံးကတော့အောက်ဆီဂျင်ပြဿနာဖြစ်ပါတယ်
ပထမတော့ဒုတိယတော့ဒီက home quarantine အနေနဲ့ဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပြီးတော့လည်းယောဂကူးစက်နှုန်းအနေနဲ့ဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပေါ့နော်တော်တော်လေးဒီတတိယလှိုင်းနဲ့ကွာခြားတော့တွေ့ရပါတယ်ဒီချိန်တတိယလှိုင်းမှာကျတော့နိုင်ငံရေးအခြေအနေမကောင်းတာကြောင့်လည်းအများကြီးပါမယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်မြင်မိပါတယ်ပြီးတော့လည်းဒီတတိယလှိုင်းကကလေးမျိုးနေထားနေဆိုတော့တော်တော်ကြောက်ဖို့ကောင်းပါလို့မြင်မိပါတယ်ဟုတ်
Meanwhile, hundreds crowd at the new giant Bang Sue station in Bangkok to get vaccinated against COVID-19, making social distancing nearly impossible as the kingdom faces its worst ever outbreak, registering record number of cases daily as hospitals now buckling under pressure. In another development, Dr. Chakarat Pitayawongwanan, Director of the Division of Epidemiology, said with stringent COVID-19 restrictions being implemented now in 13 provinces, the number of new COVID cases is expected to begin declining in at least 1 to 2 months from now. Per Bangkok Post report, these 13 provinces comprise Bangkok, Nonthaburi, Samut Prakan, Samut Sakon, Pathum Thani, Nakhon Pathom, Chonburi, Chai Chong Sao, Ayutthaya, and the southernmost provinces of Narathiwat, Patani, Songkhla, and Yala. Now, he said the healthcare system in Bangkok will regain its ability to cope with COVID-19 patients again when the number of new cases drops to between 500 and 1,000 per day. Greater Bangkok recorded 5,468 new cases, 45 more fatalities on Tuesday that were among 80 COVID fatalities, and 11,305 new cases recorded for the entire country. And this is according to the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, or the CCSA.
Meanwhile, in the Philippines, travelers from Thailand and Malaysia will be prohibited from entering the Philippines beginning July 25. Malacanang announced Friday amid the threat posed by the more transmissible Delta variant. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte approved the travel restrictions for all travelers coming from Malaysia and Thailand, or those with travel history to Malaysia and Thailand within the last 14 days preceding arrival in the Philippines. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said in a press statement, "The travel ban imposed on passengers from Thailand and Malaysia will be in effect from July 25 to 31, Roque said. He said travelers already in transit from the two countries within 14 days immediately preceding their arrival, and those who arrived before July 25 may still be allowed to enter the country. However, they are required to undergo a full 14-day facility quarantine even after getting a negative reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction, or PT-PCR result. Roque said this action is undertaken to prevent the further spread and community transmission of COVID-19 variants in the Philippines. Nations already included in the travel ban are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, United Arab Emirates, and Oman. Filipinos who are part of repatriation efforts or special commercial flights are not covered by the travel restrictions.
Meanwhile, Russia announced that a batch of its Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine was produced for the first time in Vietnam. And Vietnam is battling a new wave of COVID-19 infections as well. The test batch was produced in partnership with Vietnam's state-owned pharmaceutical company, Vabiotech. The Russian Direct Investment Fund, which financially backed Sputnik V, said this in a statement. The RDIF added that the first samples from the batch will be shipped to the vaccine's developer, the Gamaleya Center in Moscow, for quality control. The president of Vabiotech, Dat Tuan Do, welcomed the announcement, saying, quote, "It will help provide quality and affordable vaccines to Vietnam and other countries in the region." Vietnam has recently faced a surge in new infections, with the government putting about a third of the country's 100 million people under stay-at-home orders to contain the outbreak. The Southeast Asian country has been slow to procure and administer vaccines, with just 4.3 million doses given as of Monday. Russia registered Sputnik V last August ahead of a large-scale clinical trials, prompting concern among experts over the fast-track process. It has since been declared safe and over 90% effective in a report published by leading medical journal The Lancet, restoring confidence in Russia's jab. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Crystal and I will be back right after this break.
Pinag-uusapan ang mga technopreneurs dahil sa paglaganap ng internet, pero dahil nasa agrikultura ang solusyon sa kahirapan, kailangang maipauso na rin natin ang agripreneurs. Isa sa mga nagpapalaganap ng kahalagahan ng agripreneurship ay ang Go Negosyo. At para lalong maunawaan ang kahalagahan ng agripreneurship, makakasama natin ang Senior Advisor for Agripreneurship and Mindanao Programs Head ng Go Negosyo, Ms. Kingay Montiveros Malvar.
Digitalization is a great democratizer. It really equalizes the playing field at saka yung opportunities para sa mga tao. Ang dami nagbebenta online. So how will you make yourself unique? How will you make yourself attractive?
All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Kumanta, sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
And you're still watching ASEAN in Focus. Back here in the Philippines, President Duterte need to seek immunity from lawsuits since he did not commit any wrongdoing, Malacanang said on Wednesday. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said President Duterte had merely raised the fact that a president and a vice president can gain immunity from suits. He added that Duterte's recent statement was even similar to the previous remarks of his critics, including Senator Laila de Lima and election lawyer Romulo Romy Macalintal. Let's listen in.
Sa tanong na may immunity po ba ang Vice Presidente sa mga lawsuit, hindi po bagong issue nito, no? Kung inyong matatandaan na tanong din ito sa panahon ni VP Jojo Pimnay. Malinaw po ang personal kong paninindigan dito. Ang presidential immunity from suit po ay sang-ayon sa jurisprudence. Bagamat wala pa pong jurisprudence pagdating sa Vice President, siguro po magkakaroon ng pagkakataon na magkaroon ng linaw itong isyong ito kung dadalhin sa Korte Suprema. Pero magugulat po kayo na ang nagsabi na mayroong immunity ang Vice President ay walang iba kung hindi ang number one kritiko ng ating Presidente, si dating Justice Secretary Laila de Lima. Lumabas po ito sa pahayagang Rappler noong July 7, 2015. Ang sabi po niya, the Constitution states that impeachable officials shall not be removed from office except by impeachment. It does not say categorically to what extent they may be subject to prosecution without their impeachability being affected. Theoretically, they can be subject to criminal proceedings as long as they are not removed from office, such as what the Supreme Court has done with the commissioners of the COMELEC in several cases when it cited said commissioners in criminal contempt. So ang paninindigan po ni Laila de Lima, binago pa nga niya ang position po niya, ay meron daw immunity ang Vice President. Ganun din po ang opinion ng election lawyer na si Romulo Macalintal na kung maalala ninyo ay tumakbo bilang sa partido ng Dilawan. No? At lumabas po ito sa kanyang Philippine Star noong October 15, 2014. Ang sabi po niya, yung dating Vice President Binay, just like the President and all constitutional officials, is covered by immunity from suit, meaning he cannot be charged in court under the normal procedure of trial. Kaya inuulit ko po ang aking unang nasabi, let this be an opportunity to provoke jurisprudence.
Staying here in the country, Malacanang said it respects the right of detained Senator Laila de Lima to seek re-election in the 2022 national elections. Secretary Roque was reacting to de Lima's plan to seek re-election next year and make President Duterte accountable for his supposed wrongdoings during his 6-year term. De Lima, in an open letter addressed to Duterte ahead of his 6th and final State of the Nation address on July 26, said her unjust detention for the past 4 years has only strengthened her resolve to fight her advocacies. Despite her alleged political persecution, De Lima said she would not give up. However, Secretary Roque said De Lima is not a victim of political persecution. Let's listen in.
Unang-una, wala pong political persecution. Alam naman ni Laila de Lima bilang abogado that she's not accused of politically related crimes. Akusado po siya because of the heinous crime of drug trading, drug pushing, and drug trading. So, wala pong politika dyan. Now, kung tatakbo po siya, that's her right, no? Hanggang hindi po siya convicted with finality. Sana hindi siya ma-convict with finality bago dumating ang eleksyon.
The International Criminal Court or ICC cannot force the Philippines to cooperate with its planned investigation into President Rodrigo Duterte's anti-narcotics drive, Malacanang said on Thursday. Unfortunately, the lack of enforcement mechanism cannot compel the Philippines to cooperate when the President has clearly said we will not do so. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said in a virtual press briefing. Roque's statement came after the Supreme Court or SC in a ruling dated March 16 but released just on Wednesday dismissed the petitions challenging the Philippine government's withdrawal from the International Criminal Court. The SC ruling penned by Associate Justice Marvic Leonen junked the petitions for being moot and academic. The High Tribunal, however, said the Philippines' withdrawal from the ICC does not discharge a state party from the obligations it has incurred as a member. Roque dismissed the SC's remarks as obiter dictum, an opinion that is uttered by a judge but is not binding.
Meanwhile, the Philippine government and the United Nations formally launched the UN Joint Program or UNJP on human rights. In a joint statement issued on Thursday night, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said this signifies the country's commitment to partner with the UN in human rights promotion and protection. The joint program embodies the partnership trust building and constructive engagement between the Philippines and the UN on human rights promotion and protection. I commend all government agencies and the UN bodies involved for the tireless work in developing this program, according to Secretary Locsin. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara, meanwhile, described the launch as a manifestation of Manila's sincere efforts to infuse its law enforcement and investigative operations with a human rights dimension in a non-political setting. The signing of this first ever national joint program follows the adoption of Human Rights Council Resolution 45/33 on October 7, 2020, 2020, which outlines specific areas for capacity building and technical cooperation on human rights in the country. The three-year initiative will allow the United Nations and the Philippines to engage in the following areas: strengthening domestic investigation and accountability mechanisms, data gathering on alleged police violations, civic space and engagement with civil society and the Commission on Human Rights, national mechanism for reporting and follow-up, counterterrorism legislation, and human rights-based approaches to drug control.
Meanwhile, here in Cambodia on July 19, Cambodia dispatched nearly 10 tons of medical supplies via Cambodia Airways to Vietnam in a spirit of solidarity to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. The national flag carrier said the items were packed into 1,125 cartons and shipped on an Airbus A320 aircraft. From Phnom Penh to Ho Chi Minh City, the logistics of the consignment were arranged by Ministry of Health Secretary of State York Sambath. The medical supplies delivered by Cambodia Airways included 1 million face masks, along with 100,000 N95 masks and 100 oxygen concentrators. Beside medical supplies, the Cambodian government donated $200,000 and Cambodian Red Cross President Bonrani Hun Sen provided another $100,000. Vietnam-Cambodia Friendship Association or VCFA President Men Sam An also donated $50,000 from the VCFA through the Vietnamese Embassy in Phnom Penh to help fight COVID-19 in Vietnam. Prime Minister Hun Sen emphasized that the assistance was an expression of the spirit of cooperation and solidarity between friendly neighboring countries as they fight against COVID-19 together.
Thai police deployed rubber bullets, tear gas, and water cannon in Bangkok this week as protesters defied COVID restrictions to call for Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha's resignation and mark the one-year anniversary of a pro-democracy movement. Take a look.
Stay tuned as ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Ang trabaho naman talaga ng maritime group ng PNP is to enforce the maritime law.
Tayo lang yung stricto, pero in other parts of the country, pwede na naman ang tourism.
Definitely, we are ready to respond to a possible spike.
Sapagkat ang aming intensyon ay makatulong lang sa mga tao na wala talagang magamit na gamot.
92 voted for this resolution, which will make it stronger, calling on the Justice Department to come up with more stringent ways to be able to avert these hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Mas marami po tayong magagamit ngayon na mga tools or mga equipment.
Maraming salamat, Weng, at sa buong puwersa ng Balitalakayan sa pagkakataong ito.
Napakain ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Weng de la Fuente sa Balik Talakayan.
We live in interesting times.
Welcome back to the program. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP Governor Benjamin Jocno has highlighted the need to keep the central bank's accommodative stance to boost economic recovery after citing the improvement in domestic activities as the government eases movement restrictions. In a virtual briefing for the 2021 second quarter inflation report, Jocno said average inflation in April to June, although still above the government's 2% to 4% target band, decelerated to 4.3% from the previous 3 months of 4.5%. Let's listen in.
In the coming months, the continued facilitation of meat imports and other targeted programs to augment domestic supply should further temper pressures on food prices and inflation. Given current trends, our latest projections show that average inflation is likely to settle near the upper end of the target range in 2021 before easing towards the midpoint of the target range in 2022 and 2023. Meanwhile, the gross domestic product contracted anew in the first quarter of 2021, but at a relatively subdued rate of 4.2%, owing in part to the government's calibrated approach in mitigating the transmission of the virus. Keeping an accommodative stance shall also help us counteract risk aversion among banks, which continues to temper lending activity despite ample liquidity in the financial system.
In other news, France has provided 800,000 euros, approximately 47.9 million pesos, in grants to the Rural Bankers Association of the Philippines to support the country's digitalization of rural banks. The French Embassy in Manila today said the grant finances training, capacity building, and awareness raising activities for the digital transition of core banking systems to the cloud, with a focus on developing the financial inclusion of underserved and unbanked populations in the country. RBAP President Elizabeth Carlos Timbol said they look forward to working with the French Development Agency to create programs tailor-fitted to the needs of the rural banks. The embassy said rural banks in the Philippines have played significant roles in promoting inclusivity in markets underserved by the traditional commercial banks, and to remain competitive, they must modernize and adapt from manual to digitized processes.
The Business Mirror reports that sluggish private investment amid continued vaccination has prompted the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, to maintain its growth expectations for the Philippine economy this year and next year. In its Asian Development Outlook supplement released on Tuesday, ADB said growth is expected to average 4.5% in 2021 and 5.5% in 2022. The same estimates made in April 2021. The bank also said inflation is expected to average 4.1% this year and 3.5% next year. This is the same projection it made last April. The bank said sustained government spending on infrastructure and social assistance programs is supporting recovery, as did a gradual pickup in household spending aided by strong remittances. Private investment remains sluggish, but indicators such as PMI, industrial production, and imports improved gradually. The ADB also said the government's vaccination effort has accelerated to over 250,000 jobs daily. improving the prospects that community protection in metropolitan Manila could be achieved by year-end. Inflation expectations were maintained for the Philippines, ADB said, given the government's recent move to reduce tariffs on rice and meat imports. ADB said the government's measures, which are seen to allow more pork imports under low tariff minimum access volume terms, will stem price increases of these commodities in the coming months.
In Thailand, over 20,000 employees from 7 airlines are on the verge of losing their jobs if the ban imposed on domestic flights is prolonged to 3 months without any help from the long-awaited 5 billion baht soft loan from the government. That according to the Airlines Association of Thailand, or AAT. According to a Bangkok Post report, AAT President Putipong Patsartong Osot said the aviation industry in Thailand is facing a critical downturn since the pandemic last year, with passenger numbers decreasing by 64.7% in 2020. The ban imposed in Bangkok, the country's aviation hub, means 7 airlines have had to ground 170 airplanes without a new flow of income, but still have to bear the monthly cost of payroll of around 900 million baht, as in the past 17 months. That according to Santisuk Klongchaya, Chief Executive of Thai Air Asia. Waranatel Laprabang, Chief Executive of Thai Vietjet, or TVJ, said in the worst-case scenario, if the country needs to seize air travel to control the virus situation for 3 months, every airline in the country will collapse. AAT was formed last year under the cooperation of 7 airlines in Thailand, excluding Thai Airways Intercontinental, but comprising Bangkok Airways, Thai Air Asia, Nok Air, Thai Lion Air, Thai Vietjet, Thai Smile Airways, and Thai Air Asia X. A request on the soft loan is one of the priority tasks for the association to help airlines battle the pandemic.
Meanwhile, the United States and Vietnam on Monday said they had reached an agreement to resolve a dispute over the value of Hanoi's dong currency, which Washington had briefly accused it of manipulating. Washington in April withdrew its accusation, but Vietnam remains on the U.S. Treasury's monitoring list for scrutiny of its currency policies. The new agreement will resolve the dispute between the two countries, according to the joint statement. The statement said Treasury and the State Bank of Vietnam have had constructive discussions in recent months through the enhanced engagement process and reached agreement to address Treasury's concerns about Vietnam's currency practices. Vietnam's currency practices are singled out in a twice-yearly analysis. The U.S. Congress requires detailing countries which might be actively trying to keep their currencies weaker against the U.S. dollar. This is to make their exports cheaper while making American goods more expensive. The findings in the report are largely symbolic and do not entail sanctions. Under former President Donald Trump, Vietnam, along with China and Switzerland, were given the more serious designation of currency manipulations. Trump later withdrew the accusation against Beijing, while President Joe Biden removed the label. From Vietnam and Switzerland, all 3 countries remained on the monitoring list.
President Duterte on Friday called on his fellow Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, leaders to pursue bold and collaborative responses to beat the coronavirus disease and speed up global economic recovery. Let's listen in.
More than a year ago, into the pandemic, we have yet to fully contain COVID-19. Therapeutics and medical supplies, this is the most urgent given the emergencies of new variants. APEC economies must resist imposing barriers to the free flow of vaccines and related essential products. We must stabilize vaccine prices to the level that make them more affordable to developing countries. On a more strategic level, we need to democratize vaccine development and manufacturing. Let us explore the possibility of technology transfer and time-bound compulsory licensing to allow production in developing countries. We must act with resolve and urgency and hold ourselves accountable to our own public pronouncement and policies. I say this in earnest. We must get our priorities straight. How can nations have stockpiles of weapons that can destroy us all, but not have ready reserves of life-saving vaccines and medical supplies for sharing that can save us all?
Chris Nevares made the quarter-final cut in the Tokyo Olympics men's rowing singles sculls event after finishing third in his heat on Friday at the Sea Forest Waterway in the Japanese capital. Nevares clocked in at 7 minutes and 22.97 seconds, making the quarter-final cut as the top 3 rowers per heat will qualify to the next round. He will join Croatian Damir Martin, who topped hit 5 at 7:9:17, and Russian Alexander Yazovkin, who came in second at 7:14:95 in the quarterfinals on Monday. Nevares was way ahead of fourth placer Felix Potoy of Nicaragua, who finished at 7:32:54. Potoy and Benin's Privel Hincati will be playing in the repechage race.
And as always, thank you, Crystal, for keeping me company today. You have a safe weekend ahead of you.
You too, Alma. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And a special shout out to Brother Waylon Regalado, who's always watching. Thank you very much, Po, for all your support. And that's it for today's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. We'll see you back next week. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.